Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhodge of Authentic Living with Roxanne. Thanks for tuning in again this week. This week I have a colleague, Neil Cosby. Hi Neil, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Roxanne. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So thanks so much for taking the time. So Neil's an HR specialist and he's from, his firm is called HRprimed. So today what we're going to do is we're doing a bit of a special episode on the impact of COVID around performance, because there's been some really interesting things that Neil's company has been seeing in the last 6 to 8 weeks, and the implication that it's had on leadership. So Neil, I know, in the last little while I've been, talking about a lot of things COVID related, but it's kind of been starting to I'm going to say wane a bit, whereas, the podcast, we really haven't been focusing on things as much, those types of things, COVID related. And I know in the HR and leadership world, there's been a lot of, I'm going to say, nuances of, ebbs and flows that have been happening. So tell me what you were sharing with me before we got online, some of the things that you've been starting to see that HR has been having to deal with in the last week or so.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We've had a few clients, and I've heard this from some of my other consulting colleagues as well, that there's now starting to be some concerns around productivity, which is related to performance as well, while in a remote workforce. I think at the beginning of this, people tempered their expectations when people had to go work at home. Obviously, for some roles, there's no way they could do 100% of what they were doing if they were in an office. So I think employers were very much willing to temper their expectations. And to a degree, I think they still are. But some of the more extreme things that, I was told by a couple of clients today was some employees, have gone to absolute zero in terms of productivity. And, from their perspective, there really is no reason for that to be zero. They can be doing something. And somewhat a little surprising, I guess, for me to hear. So we're talking around strategies and having those somewhat difficult conversations with employees to say, look, this can't keep continuing. And trying to get at the root cause of why that is happening. And obviously the psychology behind staying at home and being isolated, could it be boredom? Could it be mental fatigue? Could it be just fear of uncertainty? So these are, I think, a number of things that we're going to be dealing with and looking at, and what a lot of employers will need support with as the time goes on.
So that's interesting, because I think to some degree psychologically, most of us were like, okay, we're going to get up on this surfboard and we're going to try to not topple over as badly as we know we can be. So people were just kind of trying to shift into this new mode.
Yeah.
And then lately, I've been hearing from a lot of coaching clients that now a lot of people are like, I can't do this anymore. I'm running out of steam. I've homeschooled the kids enough. I've been doing, like all of us, being on Zoom fests, and people are burnt out from a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So do you think that might be some of the impact that some employers are seeing? Or were these employees that they potentially had performance related concerns before that they let shelve, and that it's coming back a little bit fiercer as you're seeing?
Potentially that could be, Roxanne, although directly nobody has said that to me. And quite honestly, I haven't asked that question. Certainly with some of my clients, I know of the employees and there was never any indication of that. but to your point, I mean, when we pre-COVID days, when we talked about working at home, and I'll use myself as an example, working at home during the day meant no kids at home. It meant, none of these other kinds of pressures that come with when you've suddenly been cast in a remote workplace and you've got kids, you're trying to get your work done and kids are in the background. And that is a bit of a stressor. I think also, and again, some of this is my own personal experience with working in isolation as well, the mental fatigue. I mean, I really feel, and I don't know about you, but when you're on like a meeting, like Zoom meeting or anything, your full attention is there, your brain is flowing, your adrenaline. I find it a different type of pressure, if that makes sense. And you can only look at a computer screen for so long. I think we've gotten away for some people, some of those rules around sit at your computer for 90 minutes, take 15 minutes and walk away so you don't, do any damage to your eyes or anything like that. So again, a lot of people, maybe there was a novelty about working at home and they've since found out this isn't for me and it's not for everybody either. And maybe, the discipline of getting up in the morning, and we were having this conversation just before we went on board. You have to treat this like a job. It is get up in the morning, do your normal routine as if you were going to an office. And certainly that's something that I'm going to be and have been suggesting to my clients to tell their employees is to get in that mindset and to keep them still engaged is do what they normally do. Shave. And as you know, I was yesterday I had a full grown beard, and as I told you, I decided I'm not coming.
You look like a new man today. Like on our yesterday call, we do a writing group together. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think it may, that's a pretty interesting angle because obviously as a psychologist, I would say that, what we tell people, we talk about screens. We talk about, like we can only pivot and really work for 20 minutes and really be productive, then to go off and then to do something. But sometimes, to your point, we're on these Zoom calls, some of them 60, 90 minutes, or, if they pilfer over because there's questions. And let's say, we're doing that 6 to 7 hours a day. Along with that, we're intensely, to your point, focused on following, because we're you're not sitting across from me like we were a month ago when I met you at a meeting. Certain things we can naturally kind of get from being in someone's presence. Now I'm really having to make sure I'm getting every nuance to what you're showing me on your face. I can't see your body, so non-verbally I'm not able to pick up a lot of those things. So I'm really working with a lot less information and reference communication that I would have naturally been able to be in a room with you, Neil, and be able to pick up certain things just by not even trying.
100%. I agree with that totally. And I mean, for the most part, my experiences, and maybe the majority of others, the meetings we're on, the groups we're on, they're not contentious in nature. So can you imagine if you have to have a contentious meeting? And by no means is virtual meetings the best way to do this, but given our new reality, that may become a new normal for a while as well. And I don't think as employers you can ignore those conversations when you have such things as performance issues or maybe even some misconduct. So being able to, more to your point of reading that body language when you're in person, those conversations, when they're contentious, will become a little bit more difficult and more to that, along my point, more tiresome, more fatigue from my perspective. Fortunately, I haven't had to have one of those contentious conversations yet. But like I said, we get into those types of things, and eventually that is going to happen because the uncertainty around this is still there, of course. So,
what the difference is I think it's really, it's time, right? Because when I was doing these interviews 6 weeks ago, what we were talking about is how do we communicate more effectively virtually? How do we connect with our teams? what kind of software do you need to be able to implement it, make sure you all have a sauna and all those things that all the practical things that some people maybe potentially were hybrid. They were doing some virtual, but they were in office, some in FaceTime, those types of things. But here we're talking more about, and from some of the one-to-one coaching clients that I'm talking about, they're talking about, I am just tired. If I hear one more client say that to me, that they are fatigued, they're not sure really why they're fatigued, their schedule's not any different.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they have all the pressures we're talking about potentially. And some people don't have kids at home, in that their kids are kind of staged out, or maybe they're living on their own. But people are talking about, I feel really, really tired, and they seem to be a lot more anxious.
Yeah, and I would concur with that wholeheartedly. My opinion is it's those other outliers that are having, as well as work, as well as, productivity, trying to stay engaged. Those other outliers of, I'm trying not to get sick. I'm trying to protect my family.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be, you have all that. And I don't know if you've heard this, Roxanne, but certainly I have. People's sleep patterns are totally disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
People are waking up for 2 hours in the middle of the night just thinking. And some people have said, they've described it to me as not anxious, not stressful, but I'm just thinking. And I think, you know what, that's normal in this time, because we have never dealt with anything like this in our lives. I've often been quoting my grandparents, who, I'm originally from England. My grandparents were alive and living in England when World War II was on. And I remember the conversations, I'm recalling them more and more about, the uncertainty of those days. And even when the tide of the war was changing and it looked like they were going to defeat the Germans, it was still uncertainty. You didn't know if there was going to be a last minute assault, and England was invaded. Mm-hmm. And I recall, my grandfather on my dad's side in particular saying it was tiresome. So worrying can be tiring for sure. And although we may not show it in other ways or think that we're not tired, how can you not be impacted by this? Okay. And you've got a million pieces of information coming at you. We know that there are still some people out there that do not see this as a real threat. And again, from my own personal experience, do I think about that? Yeah, I do. But I defer myself to the experts that are saying this is not the flu. This is more infectious. This is more dangerous. But it's tiresome as well, and somewhat frustrating, I think, when you see those conspiracy theorists, those people that are saying, why are we having a complete economic shutdown? There's no reason for this. And, even more frustrating, given the fact I have two parents in their 70s, mm-hmm. It's just impacting old people. What do we care?
Right. And like, to your point, I'll give you my example. My mom there was no right way around it. She had to see the doctor yesterday. Mm-hmm. So of course, I'm, going to take her, and, not really going out in that, and I'm trying to act like, okay, well, Mom, it's fine. We'll do mm-hmm. this. And so we got, I had some really nice homemade masks. So I made sure we had them. But even the reaction when I got to the doctor's office, now she's in Mississauga. Yeah. And so, I've not really been out of town, and then mm-hmm. I go, and then just the reaction. So I'm taking her, and she's, my mom's in a walker. She, had a stroke a couple of years ago. And so I'm trying to get in the doctor's office, but apparently there's these big signs that says I had to call before to let them know. So I didn't know that protocol. So I'm like reefing on the door. And then, and then getting alarmed because I'm at the door, because now there's another person behind me, apparently, that's supposed to be coming in. And so mm-hmm. it was just, and I'm a pretty level person generally, but now I start to worry because my mom's not well. And I'm thinking because they're reacting to us on top of it, plus filling the prescription that she needed. So I think you're right. It's so many things that are unconscious, and, with, from a perspective that so much of us functions unconsciously, that I wonder the impact of that, and the fact that we've been at this it's almost 7 weeks now, right?
Yeah. I I would think, if we get down the road of what can the leaders of organizations do to try to support their people in this, is I think there needs to be a push to contact the EAP if you are able to provide that. Get the
Yes.
mental health piece is really coming into play here now. Any kind of novelty that there was for this has long gone. It's now in, we need to manage our people's mental health mode and ensure that they're staying safe and psychologically safe. And to a very, very large degree, employers have that obligation, even though people are working remotely, that is still the workplace. So maintaining some psychological safety. And, I think I've said this all along, even business-wise, we need to be innovative, we need to be creative, we need to be agile and adjust to these changing circumstances as they move along. We can absolutely have our longer term plans, but there's got to be contingencies. There's got to be A, B, C, or D. But managing your employees should be a number one priority if this is going to be the way of the work world for quite a while. And more to that, when this is all over, and it will be over, employees are going to remember how their employers treated them during this. And that's going to send a strong message after that.
So really what I hear, right, is that management or leadership needs to take a pivot and really maybe plant a flag and talk a little bit more about mental health. Because
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, because if you're talking about the things you're seeing and I'm talking about things that I'm seeing, reality is gone are the days where, say 3 weeks ago, where we were talking about we will adjust, we'll get through this, we'll flatten out the curve, those types of things. That language now is, okay, we're past that point.
Yeah.
And now it's, let's be realistic about where we're at, what's really happening with people, and versus we'll get through this. The question becomes innovative from a leadership perspective. How do you pivot so you can assist people? And maybe you need to start to be talking a little bit more openly about mental health.
I think so. I think just as you and I are doing, I think managers, leaders need to talk about their own experiences. Make themselves a little bit vulnerable, because some people may not want to talk about this. It's not always easy for some people to discuss how they're feeling for a variety of reasons. And going back to your point of, adjusting 2 or 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, saying adjusting, we'll be agile, we'll get through this. There was nothing wrong with those statements. That was a good start. But more to your point about pivoting, now we need some concrete strategies. We need some concrete actions. And whether it's you can do, I believe, sorry, just lost my train of thought. I've said from the beginning that we are built for this, to get through this, because of the virtual technology we have. Can you imagine if this had happened 30, 25, maybe even 20 years ago? This would be far, far worse.
Yes.
So utilize and leverage the technology. I truly believe, and I've expressed this, although I haven't created anything, you can have a virtual wellness day where, you create it so it's something fun for people. In the absence, and I say that because in the absence of people being able to meet at a restaurant or a club or a bar or a coffee shop, people are being creative and having virtual get-togethers. And I've participated in a couple myself, and they're a lot of fun. You can get funny and silly and only one involved alcohol, by the way. But it's just a new way of having fun. Is it sustainable? I believe it can be for a while. Again, it's just that innovation, creativity, constantly looking what's the next issue or challenge that might be around the corner, and coming up with strategies to resolve that, which is certainly something I am, as well as a lot of other people I know, are concentrating on, is what are the possible scenarios. And that's where we have to be right now.
And that's interesting, right? Because I know I spent like 20 years in the EAP field, and you do see a lot of the bigger providers having a lot of online platforms. But I think the languaging has to come from leadership, like you're saying, like you're talking about scenarios, I'm talking about scenarios. We're all a bit anxious, and if anybody were to tell you they're not anxious, I think they'd be lying to you. Truth
I
be
agree,
known,
100%.
right? And yes, we all deal with our anxiety in different ways. But at the end of the day, you know, there's fear. Like you said, your parents are in their 70s. My mom and dad are in the late 70s, early 80s. So there's that. Even though you're thinking, oh, we're doing everything that's needed, there's the
Yeah.
fear that any of us could lose our loved ones,
Oh,
right? Which is a
absolutely.
reality, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And in this day, in these times, and I try not to think about this too much. Anybody's parent can get sick now. Hopefully it doesn't happen. Pass away, and you will never have. The only time you've seen them is virtually, and then we get into the funeral. So.
Yeah.
Nobody should we, do I encourage people to be thinking about that? Well, it's certainly there. I think we need to be aware of it. I myself, I mean, I've got 2 teenage kids, one's 18, and I've had these conversations with my teenage daughter about what are you going to do if something happens to me or your mom, because this is a reality now.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to have that conversation. And while we have to be sensitive to this, I think we have to face some of the potential situations that could happen that are not very nice to think about. So
let's try to brainstorm then for what potential things leadership should be considering. I heard that I love the idea about a wellness day.
Yes.
So what would something like that? What do you think from an HR perspective that should encompass?
It could be anything from let's do online. I have a colleague. She provides corporate wellness in the form of, she's Polynesian, and she does Polynesian dance. It's called Kalani. And she's been doing this online. And I hooked her up with a couple of clients that were looking for things like that. And, so those are things that can be done. Start a virtual workout group. God, I am missing the gym. I was I was there very regularly. And I think a lot of people are missing out on that physical exercise piece, which, as we know, is certainly connected to mental health. It is, I can honestly say, it is not the same working out at home, but if you have other people doing it with you, it becomes a little bit more fun. So there's things like that. Doing a virtual cooking group. I mean, in the workplace, we used to have potlucks and international, so show each other how to cook and be in each other's kitchen and just have a lot of laughs and don't drink too much wine or sherry. That's for the food. So it's those are just some of the ideas that you can
or even team building, Neil.
Absolutely.
Like if you think about it, right? If we're talking about the anxiety, or now it's kind of like, now what? Right? Like I've been doing this and I thought it was going to be done by now. And what kind of tips and tricks that people could share, and they could share about what they've been doing, or like you said, having the Zoom family calls, or
As you're talking, I'm even thinking, having leadership just pull together and ask what's working, what's not. And although that's more of a business related thing, for me, the optimum goal is to get people to open up to talk about the other things that are going on, because I think people need to be heard. They want to be heard. If all you've got is your kids and your dog or your cat, you're not being heard. And again, for some people, over the phone or virtually talking to somebody, that's just not going to cut it. They need that face-to-face. So if I'm saying I'm feeling one thing and you're feeling it, it opens up the door so much more. It just takes that one opening, and I believe that the rest will follow when they're feeling it. So one of the other things, if I can just segue into another thing, Roxanne, is you see these memes on Facebook, and quite frankly, I laugh at them too, but alcohol consumption during the day. That's come up a couple of times with a couple of calls. And I think employers need to be mindful of that, and not try to in whatever way they can. Just, certainly the expectation when you're at work is you won't drink at work. So try not to, and again, with no disrespect and no judgment, I think employers at the beginning, there is a little bit of tempering of they're at home.
Mhm.
But, again, from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, that's starting to become an issue if it's not an issue already.
Right, and also issues around domestic violence too, right? Like, I
Yes,
mean, so
absolutely.
I think if we think of what would have been happening internally within a workplace,
Mhm.
whatever the issues were, what would keep people away from work, and now people are at home, and
Yeah.
there's no need to call in sick
Mhm.
because I can work, I have a computer, I have a phone, I can do all those things. But
Yeah.
that, along with the compounded stress of, like you said, we don't, you're not going out for that quick coffee with that friend that tells you the funny jokes and makes you forget about what you're dealing with
Mhm.
at work, or all the loss that you're feeling, even though
Yeah.
you're seeing someone.
Yeah.
You enjoy spending time seeing people in your office, those types of things. We've lost all our friendships.
Yeah.
We've tried our best, and I know I do, but still I'm not seeing my friends, I'm not seeing
Mhm.
my family. All those things, it is, I could see how it's a cumulative effect that
Yeah.
may be impacting productivity.
If I go back to my organizational behavior books, the majority of people, the reason they stay in working relationships is because with an employer is because of the social relationships they build. And again, some people may not be totally conscious of that. So that's definitely another contributor to some of this. People are kind of getting fed up with this. Some people are kind of getting fed up with this remote work. The other thing that pops into my mind as we're talking is challenging work. And this goes back to, if people aren't doing the full scope of their job and the employer's okay with that, is it still challenging for them? Because some people, they need that challenge in their work life. And if they don't get it, they get bored pretty easy. And, we all know that to some degree, extreme more than others, the work that we don't like, we tend to avoid in some capacity.
Yes, of course. So things might be piling up. So for managers that are now pivoting and managing virtually,
Yeah.
and so for maybe employers that might listen to this and say, wow, we may be having an issue,
Mhm.
but we may be missing the mark. What could be some ways that they could, and I'm not suggesting a witch hunt in any way by
No.
all means, but what if you're seeing these patterns, one could assume that these are patterns that are existing in different sectors.
Yeah. Yeah. So individual check-ins are always good. I mean, if you are an organization that was doing coaching sessions as part of your performance management system, no reason for you to stop. Keep doing those. They're crucial to getting a sense of where the employee is at. Sorry. Maybe now at 6 or 7 weeks, maybe now is a time to do kind of an impromptu quality of work life survey to find out.
Yeah.
People may not want to speak to you for the record, but you do an anonymous quality of work life on where people are at. That can be a very good indicator as well. More to your point that you said a bit ago about keeping the lines of communication open, that has never stopped. We just need to possibly amp it up a little bit because people are now starting to feel the stress of working in a remote workplace and with no end in sight. So,
And maybe re-rolling out their EAP programs, maybe that might be an opportunity
absolutely,
at this
I think
point, right?
that's a
Yeah,
good opportunity.
that's probably a good thing, maybe
Yeah.
to start to do more of their, lunch and learns that they have as part of their quarterly contract, things around work-life balance,
Mhm.
maybe a shifting of work-life balance and what it
Yeah.
means now, because there's no balance anymore.
Yeah.
And strategies for things like managing boredom or anxiety,
Mhm.
how to have fun. Because I
Yes.
think that's the one thing that you've mentioned it a couple of times, and that's with my girlfriends, we got on the phone the other day, and we were just silly, and we were talking about nothing and everything, and
Yeah.
that's the part that I missed more
Yeah.
than ever. Of course, I miss seeing them, but you know, it was stupid at times. And then I was like, whoa, like getting all of them, as many of them as we could on Zoom was so, everybody sent, I set it all up and I said, everybody said, oh my goodness, that was the best thing.
Yeah.
Because we laughed and we chuckled and, you know, stuff
Yeah.
like that and told jokes. And
Mhm.
so I think that's the part that may be lacking also. Like, you know, okay, we can do this, It's 7 weeks, it's 8 weeks now. Okay. And people aren't having the kind of fun that they used to before.
Agreed. And I mean, as we're talking, I mean, ideas just keep popping in my head about how to possibly alleviate this. So why not at noon, everybody take a virtual lunch together? And those are the times when you're silly and laid back with your fellow employees. And, you know, you can make fun of whatever everybody's eating, if they're eating, because I'm also hearing a lot of people are just, we're going lunch, surviving on coffee. So, you know, there are a lot of creative ways we can try to manage this and manage it successfully, tempering expectations as well. And again, as you've said, we can't stress communication enough in all of this. So,
So it's just pivoting communication so it looks different, right? Like, so
yes.
we kind of think, let's the flow down. I think we need to do that, but just that employers have to think about how are we becoming more vulnerable in some way
Yeah.
so that people, if I'm the CEO and you're my senior team, am I acting so put together, even though I may be also struggling?
Mhm.
Because I'm thinking, boy, how much more of this can I take? And my senior team is
Yeah.
probably feeling the same things, but I'm not sharing that because I'm supposed to kind of
Mhm.
keep things going.
And that's a good point. As we've been talking, you know, and I had this thought before I came in, I think even for managers and leaders, the stress upon them is even more because quite frankly, and I don't say this disrespectfully, they're having to take care of a lot of employees in a very different way. And I mean, part of it also could be, you know, if the company is still maintaining success or has adjusted their success expectations, share that with employees so that they know what you're doing is still important to us and we need you to still be working at as much capacity as you can. Um, you know, sometimes team meetings involved, from my experience, a good story of the day. And that's not just in the nonprofit world, that's in the private world as well. What did we do that was really good today? And I still think you can have those success stories when you're still working remotely. And I can assure you, as I'm sure you're well aware of, that anybody who's talking to clients, to customers, to, you know, vendors, you're all leaning on each other. I know for myself, I've had those you're sharing things, and maybe you're sharing things with people that you normally wouldn't share
Yeah.
because of the situation. And, you know, for the most part, I don't think that's a bad thing. As we keep saying, we're all in this together, and complete strangers will probably become good friends after this just because of the nature of relationships.
One other thing I thought of, Neil, is what about maybe the leaders or managers impressing on people that mental health days are still a part of
Yes.
the norm. So
Yeah.
I think of it, you know, of course people would take the mental health days just because, but they would, if they would be in person, but ready to be able to have it so that people could just take a day off
Yeah.
where they can just shut off, you know, like you said, stay in their pajamas, play with their kids, you know, cook all day, do whatever they want. So I think that permissiveness may actually give, and not suggesting that, you know, everybody do it all at once, but so that people are aware that if you're really, really having a tough time, that you know, if you haven't slept that night, or, you know, your kids aren't doing well or whatever, that you can take that to kind of give yourself a bit of a break and then come back in with a bit more, you know, higher level of productivity, you know, for the rest of the week.
And I was having a somewhat related conversation with a client today who is still going to encourage people to take if this stretches out into the summer months, they're still going to encourage people to take vacation. And by vacation, they really mean, okay, you may not be able to go to Wasaga Beach. You may be
Right.
confined to your backyard or your front porch, but you're away from the computer.
Right.
You're taking that time, which is very much owed to you, which you've earned. Take your week or 2 week and just turn off your computer. Do not check in at work or anything like that. And if people need that, this particular client said, they're very open that if people need that now, they're very much willing to approve that. So yes, people need to take advantage of the time that they have available to them to take care of other things, not have that weight of, it may not be stress, it just may be weight of work on them, and then they can concentrate on family and home, and it's one less thing that is weighing on them for sure. So
well, Neil, this has been an impressive 45 minutes. There's so many things,
Has it been 45 minutes?
Yes, it's been, yeah.
A lot.
Yes, but I think this has been so engaging because I think this is the first time I've had a conversation of this nature, because I've really not talked to people about, you're seeing it all over social and you're hearing people talking about it, but to actually talk about someone that's in companies from an HR perspective, I think it really brings to fruition where we're at. And maybe in a month from now, we'll be having a different conversation.
Absolutely.
That would be interesting based on whether we're starting to get out there, or if we're still maintaining, then we may have a new iteration of how people are coping a month from now.
Yeah. And I think, it's probably obvious to say that if there is if we're in a position to have an easing of restrictions and people are able to get out a little bit, that's going to have a positive impact for sure. So,
absolutely.
I would, I just go back, at least from my perspective, agility, and it's an always evolving situation. So, yeah, but I do believe that at some point this will all be over, and we will come out of this in a better way for sure. So,
well, Neil, thanks again for
taking
taking your time. I think anyone listening, whether you're a leader or other HR professionals, managers, I'm sure there's a lot, or people at home can relate to what we've been speaking about. So what I would say is, Neil, where can people get a hold of you? If there's people that are needing HR support at this time, where could they reach you at?
Yep. So we have a website, www.hrprimed.ca. There's some contact information there. I can be reached at Neil, Neil, at HRprimed.ca. HRprimed is spelt exactly as it sounds, HRprimed. And, or you can contact me directly on my phone, 905-929-5075. And I appreciate the opportunity to put that out there, Roxanne.
Thanks so much. So for everyone, we're in it. This is different. We may be a bit more bored and anxious. Try to do something smaller that's a little bit different, but definitely connect. And if you're an employee, reach out to your employer just to let them know what you're needing and to utilize your EAP services. And what that is most companies have them. If there are no services, what you could do is also reach out to me and I'll let you know where there's services available. So again, Neil, thanks for your time. And this is Roxanne Durhodge of the Authentic Connection Movement. I'm a mental health and wellness specialist. If you're needing any support, give me a call at roxannedurhodge.com. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.